So it's 9 o'clock and we are ready to start the morning webinar. Today we are having, the topic is the PMO business case, and we are having an international PMO expert in facilitating our webinar, Dr. Robert Joslin from AIPMO. But before I'll give the stage to you, I'll go through a quick introduction set of slides in a few minutes. And so since we have people who are not familiar with our association, few words about that. Many of you are members, but there are also international guests and people who are maybe first time in our morning webinar. So we are a non-profit association open for all who are interested in project management. We are a member in the International Project Management Association, and we have about 3,500 members, mostly in Finnish or international companies working in Finland as well. And there are about 600 organizations. Some of the logos you can see on the screen. So what we are known of is we give about 50 different events in the area of or field of project management. We have webinars, workshops. We have a couple of larger events, the project management days. Also the 3 PMO, which is mainly focused for the PMO professionals. And then we have these Kakola workshops, and I will tell something about that also. And then we, of course, arrange AIPMO certification exams and workshops, etc. We have a really excellent professional magazine, Projektiammattilaiset, Project World. And thinking of the certifications, we are probably one of the big users of AIPMO certifications. We have over 6,000 certified project management professionals in Finland, AIPMO certified. So, as I mentioned, the Kakola, we are going to have a PMO summit in Kakola, which is a old prison, nowadays not a prison anymore. We have a 2 days, I would say, excellent PMO workshop, and Robert is coming to facilitate our workshop. All who are coming there will also get one of Robert's books, and the company will be part of this this assessment of AIPMO, which is not only about maturity, but it's also about, and especially about, the impact of your PMO. So really recommend. This is, I would say, one time only, one of a kind. So please take a look and please join us. Kakola is an excellent, or I would say, interesting place as well, since it's, as said, it's an old prison, and they have a church hall in the prison, and that is the place where we are going to have the workshop. There's a picture from last spring when we had one of these Kakola workshops as well. I will send you some information after the webinar as well. But so we also need you in this webinar. Please keep the microphones and videos off, but please use the chat channel, since we are going to take some of the questions at the end of the presentation and let Robert to answer the questions. Okay, so now let's get down to the business, or maybe I should say, let's get down to the PMO business case. So I'm really happy that we have Robert Joslin as our facilitator. He's very experienced PMO leader, consultant, nowadays researcher, written plenty of books in the field of PMO. He's one of the leading global voices and thought leaders in the PMO field. And he's also the founder of AIPMO, which stands for Association of International PMOs. It's truly fantastic that we are able to bring these such top international experts into our events, and accept the great news is that Robert is also coming to visit Finland next November, leading our PMO Summit workshop in Kakola, which is one of a kind. So it's great to have you with us today, and thank you very much for joining us and helping us. So please, Robert, it's your turn, and the stage is all yours.
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction. So it's a pleasure to be with everybody here. You say international PMO expert. I mean, for me, is that I never really consider myself an expert. It's just something that is important to me. Having worked on projects actually since the age of 7 years old with my father, he was an electronics engineer, and I working with him in the workshop. I knew the importance of preparation, the importance of getting things right. And this was back in the 60s and in the 70s. And I think my mother was Swiss, my father was English, and this whole mindset about preparing for something. So I was a Chief Scout as well as Boy Scout before. And actually the concept of being prepared, PMOs are all about being prepared on projects and preparation. So if you actually get it right first time, it makes such a difference. And that's part of the reason why I set up AIPMO, primarily because I saw so many failed projects. And if you see failed projects and you see the consequences on individuals, like on people's health, marriages, in fact, their lives. I actually knew a CEO and CFO in Switzerland that committed suicide because their projects weren't succeeding and they weren't meeting their goals. It's one of the biggest insurance companies in the world. And then I thought, okay, let's do something about it. And so then I actually did my PhD at 50. And then I set up AIPMO in 2015. So it's 10 years old today. So we have 1 hour, I think, approximately, or 50 minutes. So we have a lot of slides here. Some I've actually put down as like a little curious cat. So it's actually more, we won't actually just go through it. It's more just reference for yourselves. I've tried to go more for the complete rather than for the short. And therefore you can actually take the slides and then go through if things are not actually are not clear in the explanation. So as you see on the slide introduction, you can see the slide, yeah? Is that correct?
Yes. Probably.
So this is an AI picture of Switzerland. I actually live on the Lake of Zurich, so I actually see a bigger lake than that. I see some mountains, but not the ones. In fact, probably this picture, if it was to look at it for today, a lot of those glaciers have melted. Unfortunately, we have one from Zurich. It's actually gone now. I remember for the last 35 years, it was always there. So unfortunately, global warming is impacting us all. But still, we have nice houses and we still have nice lakes. So background, I'm really an engineer. I never consider myself an academic. I just, like my father, I like to solve problems. And I think for the engineers out there, we like to solve problems and build things. And it's very frustrating when you see things that are not going particularly well, and you want to stand up and then actually either take control or find ways to solve it. So I love working in projects. I hate operations. I like to make things as efficient as possible. Maybe that's my Swiss side. I've worked for various organizations, including McKinsey, for example, Logica. I've had 3 companies myself. In fact, this with the association and with the organizations behind it, this is probably my biggest endeavor and probably my last. I retire in 2 to 3 years' time. I really enjoy solving problems, and I think with AI, it makes life a lot easier, but you've got to really be able to train it properly. And I think the books I wrote were before AI, and I know that with it now, I can work faster, but you still got to manage it. I'm probably one of the few people in the world that have been on the standard committees. I was actually working for CCTA in England, which was the guys that wrote Prince 2. I was working on the predecessor and also benchmarking. I also volunteered for PMI on their portfolio standard and program standard. I've also my PhDs in methodologies as well, so I know the AIPMO competence baseline 4, and I've developed all the frameworks. In fact, I give a framework course. I think it's the only one in the world where you actually teach consultants and also my PhD students and master's students actually how to frame a problem. And then it's so much easier if you frame it, you understand it, you can solve it. If you can't frame it, you can't structure it, then it creates all sorts of problems. I've also developed co-developed the AIPMO's maturity model. It's not the purpose of today's conversation, but we'll just touch upon it. If you do come to Kakula, we're actually going to be using that model. And for the people interested, you can actually see it on the website link PMO-mi.com, and actually describes the actual benchmarking model that we spent 7 years building and researching. So AIPMO, it's Swiss. In fact, this is where I live on the Lake of Zurich. It's a beautiful place. Everybody swims in the lake and hiking, etc. This is actually in early winter here, the actual picture. Zurich is just over here. The vision of AIPMO, and this really goes back to the importance of PMOs, and I'll touch on a slide, is that we want to put the building blocks into place to create PMO management. So it's a term we defined in 2017. It's actually the domain. You write standards on domains, not on an entity. PMO is an entity, a project is an entity, project management is the domain. So we had to create the domain to become a recognized international profession. It's not today, and I don't think project management is either. The mission why we exist is to advance the theory, so we're actually research-based. We create this thing called a research-driven books and frameworks, not something from Robert Joslin's view or Yoxi's view, for example. So we take a world view, not a local view. So to design, implement of high-performing collaborative PMOs. So this is important because PMOs don't really work together. They're more like silos, the way they operate. We want to encourage the collaboration, and that then empowers professionals then to create impact, measurable impact. The strategy, the how we do it. So we actually built a set of frameworks. Originally, we had just one framework in 2015, and then we've now gone to 10 integrated frameworks. So just like if you build buildings, I was actually working on NEOM, the biggest in the world. In fact, we set up the PMO with all the frameworks. They chose us because of that. Just like when you build buildings, you build structures, blueprints, etc. This is the same thing. If you're actually going to build standards and books, they all need to integrate to each other. So we take the models. I'm actually going to show you some bits of them today. And then we also partner like with IPMA and other organizations to put these building blocks into place so then we can create the profession. So that links back into the vision. It's just a few perspectives. I won't actually read this. It's really for you later. We're the first ones that actually wrote books on PMO management. In fact, we wrote the first book on PMO principles in 2017. This is the second edition. It's a small one. It's going to be part of the Kakula event. In fact, I wrote the principles for PMI in 2017 for project program portfolio management. They took the principles for portfolio that you can see, and then in the program management, they left them out. And then in the fifth edition of the program standard, PMI actually bought 15 copies of this book. This is the one I wrote with Professor Rolf Muller in Sweden. And this is corporate governance portfolio program project principles. We also used it on mega projects as well. This is the PMO service and capabilities. I'm going to be referencing that. This is the PMO management standard. We've written it 2 years ago. We haven't published it. We actually test everything. So we take time to test, like you would in a car, like you would in an aeroplane. We don't just push it out. We actually test all the concepts before. We have other books as well. We link with universities. We've got the first PhD in PMO management. We also did a DBA in PMO management. So this is the PhD with alma mater. And there's other things we go and do as well. If you want to connect to us, we have a LinkedIn page. We've got the PhD forum. In fact, this is the biggest one on LinkedIn for project management and PMO management. And we just set up a new group recently called the Management Offices, Community of Management Offices. There's so many discussions about whether P stands for Project Program Portfolio, or you get the Transformation Management Office or the Strategy Management offices. These are all just management offices. So we created a group primarily because whenever we published in other groups, they would delete things, or even though they're just research, so it's quite territorial. So we have the rules and principles for this particular group. So please do join if you're PMO people. We actually publish research from this group into the in more the practitioner group. Then let's look at some insights and challenges. Focus on this section. So if you look as an evolution, and I think it's always good when you look back to look forward. In the 80s and 90s, you had projects, you had programs. In fact, I don't think programs would exist if portfolio management actually came first. And I think actually Half Double in Denmark don't actually describe programs. And there's a big topic around this. Do they actually really exist? And then you look into PMOs, and this is when P3O came out from the British government. They talked about functions. We formed in 2015. And then you see the evolving understanding of PMOs. I think if you look at superficially, people think they know about PMOs. We give courses on this. In fact, we keep pushing our depths of understanding in what we're doing. And you'll see actually this presentation was created and finished yesterday at 6 o'clock. I probably spent over 2 weeks actually putting it together because of all the frameworks and models in it. So this was the focus originally. Then it goes much more today into the PMO side. We don't just look at a single one. We actually have all our frameworks. We talk about service domains, service groups, services. We have operating models. So in the past, people talk about projects. And if you take before Henry Ford produced the production line, everything revolved around the car. And this book is a 700-page book, took 3 years to write. In fact, I wrote a lot of it at NEOM to finish it off in the evenings and over the weekends. We sort of see PMOs as very much an enablement of the organization. And I'll actually show you the potential impact they have, which is actually quite astounding. So really, it's they span functions. They're built in different ways. We talk about federated composite structures, network structures, etc. Things you may not necessarily have heard in the main domain, and that's because we're actually creating this, we're researching and creating it, and we write papers and do blog posts, etc. The main focuses of the project management associations are here, especially project management. And if you could be cynical, you could say, well, that's where most people are. That's where the money is on certifications. Portfolio management is just really the capping on the top. But now the world is moving much more into the PMO side, or seems to be moving to the PMO side. Definitions. So definitions are very important because invariably most people who work in project management don't speak English as a mother tongue. So I have English as mine and as German. But not only must you be clear, but also definitions evolve as understanding evolves. So this has taken us about 6 years to actually evolve this definition. In fact, we have a simple one, which is this one, and we have a more advanced one, which I won't describe now, but it's part of the courses. So we don't call a PMO a function. The reason being is because functions like finance, like marketing and sales don't get deleted. They don't transform that often, but PMOs do. In fact, PMOs don't mature, they actually evolve and adapt. If they don't evolve and adapt, then verbally they become obsolete. So we call it an entity operating either independently or with other PMOs. And then this is actually important, mandated services. So PMOs originally set up as a compliance and assurance, and then they, if evolved is the right term, PMI talked about the directive PMO. Well, actually, this is illegitimate because the fact that PMOs are always meant to be compliance and assurance, and you have another group of project teams actually doing the work. So if you've got somebody setting up the governance and doing the work, there's a conflict of interest. But that's the way it is today. So we define this as mandated services, so compliance and assurance and whatever else has been mandated, and non-mandated services. These are more the informal services with the responsibilities of the delivery and management of those services. And services can range from whatever. There's a book I'm going to show you, which we've got over 230, 40 services. They can easily be hundreds more. It's just the book is 600 pages. And so we see no point in actually adding another 300, because if you can't work out how to write services after reading 200 or so, probably you shouldn't be in the PMO side. So this is the book here. It took us 3 years to write. We published ourselves. We have 22 service domains in here. To give you an example, PMI, they use 10 performance domains. Axelis use 8 themes. We have 24. So all the devil's in the detail. So we specified it. We've got certain rules how we build frameworks. So this is one, for example, one service domain frameworks and methodologies. This is another one, PPM tools management. We have things like an integration domain across the whole lot. We have financial management, communication management, etc. So this is the definition. This is actually quite fundamental, this slide, the importance of PMOs. In research, so I did my PhD in methodologies. You read lots of papers about why projects go wrong, but it's really focusing. You need to focus on the right thing. And often researchers will get influenced by what exists rather than taking a fresh plate or a fresh look at things. So we ask in every course, and we've been running them now since 2015, literally thousands, we've been on our courses, hundreds of PMOs. We ask them, what are the main problems you've seen on projects? And we actually ask them to put their names against each. And then what they do is that, can you actually solve these problems on projects through a competent project manager that's well networked, effective governance and high-performing PMO? And so the one denotes, yes, it goes through governance first. If not, then the PMO and then the competent project manager. And there's an other. Invariably, we find that 99%, in a lot of cases 100%, you can resolve it with those three things. If you look at the competent project manager, who's actually responsible or should be responsible for recruiting that project manager? Is it operations or is it the PMO? It's actually the PMO plays a major role or should play a major role in actually recruiting the competent, well-networked project manager. Who sets up the governance on projects? It's the PMOs, or they should be doing that. And of course, they're responsible for themselves. If they take these responsibilities and they do it properly, and you have PMOs in the right place, not just one PMO, but actually a networked or an operating model, you can actually resolve the majority of project problems before they become too severe to actually resolve. This was quite astounding when we do it, and every time we do it, it really surprises people. And they often say, well, our PMO doesn't do that. Okay, but we're saying if you actually have this in place, then this is actually what's possible, or show what's possible. So this is a very nice example of why PMOs are often challenged. We have people that come in our courses, 50% of them sort of say, well, we're always challenged on the value we create, at least 50%. And we actually do real case studies, which is very unusual for certification courses because most of them are cookie cutter solutions. So we actually take the methodology and apply it on the real problem of a people that comes on their PMO, and then they actually present the presentations. So this is a competing values framework, the opposite: satisfied, dissatisfied, fully, and not implemented. And this is what the client wants. So when the PMOs come, they actually delight the client, and they meet the performance needs. But the problem is, over time, they become taken for granted. So it becomes a basic need. And this is the fundamental challenge that PMOs have always got to consider implementing. Yeah. So once become a basic needs, they shift the satisfaction. Once delighted, they're not really that satisfied. So the point is that unless you continually innovate, adapt, evolve, then you have a risk of just being considered an overhead of the organization. So this is a nice model that explains the problems that PMOs actually have. This is why in AIPMO, we set ourselves as innovation focused. So we set up the first PhD forum on LinkedIn. We have 5,000 people. We have all the journals there. The first PhD, this maturity model took 7 years to build. It's not just maturity and impact. We've got brand new scales for maturity and impact. And we also look at multiple PMO assessments as well, and many other innovations. We also have a unique 10-point book review system. So you make sure that we have about 14 people that review books. Then we review it, we QA it, and the editor then reviews it. Then we publish the results. AI, everybody does it. AI. The standard, this was actually challenging to actually write this. It took over a year to write, but all the other books were sort of written before this. We will probably be launching this soon once we make a partnership. I can't talk about partnership. And there's various other things we do as well. So we try to actually be innovative. We share the information like we're going to share today about business cases. And a lot of this today was sort of tested as part of the models and things like that. So now let's look at PMOs. When you actually present something, it's all about structure. Try to structure something at the same level. There's rules of doing it. In consulting, we talk about MISI, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. It means no gaps and overlaps between categories. If you do that, you have a common base of understanding to build knowledge on. And so one of the ways we want to look at this is looking at formal and informal PMOs with respect to business cases. And then we have the other points down here. So this is the point I would like to hand over to Joksi. He's got polls. So he will actually launch the polls for you. And if you could actually do them as fast as possible. So the first one was your PMO approved via formal business case? Second one was the main reason for you, actually, I just let you read these yourselves. I can actually do this as well, can I? Can I respond? No, I can't. So if you could actually read through those and answer them as soon as possible and see what the results come out like. We're trying to get a good idea of what is the status in Finland regarding PMOs. Are they formal, informal business cases? Are you challenged by perception from executives as well as from the project managers? And what is the biggest challenge to actually justify a PMO or a service? So we got 24 completed out of 51. That's 4 questions to answer. You have 35 out of 151. We got 62. We have 72 out of 151. Yoxi, do you know if when you share the results, they're all shared together, we can see all 4 next to each other? Or we haven't tested that?
No, I haven't, but I guess they would be shown all together. Yeah, now we have already over 100.
Yeah, so we got 103 so far. Do you want to close it down in 10 seconds or so?
Yes.
Or 15 seconds. So if anybody, just hurry up and finish off. So we've got 105 so far to 151. So we're closing it in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We've 111 so far. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. The poll is ended, and I will share you the results.
Okay.
So let's see.
Yeah, we can see this now. So probably everybody can see the results. I can see the results. So structured business case 14%. Somewhat we had a justification, but not a full case 32%. No, evolved informally 17. Not sure. And so obviously there's a need there, or there's an opportunity, and we'll cover that. So what was the main reason for creating your PMO? So reduced project challenges 32%. So this is good. So that's actually a delivery PMO. So improved reporting and tracking, align projects to strategy. That's probably portfolio management. So governance and compliance. Okay, this is more the assurance aspects of it. So it's pretty equally spread on that one. How do executives in your organization perceive the PMO today? Strategic part of 22%, necessary but overhead 15. Okay. So it's a perception there. Administration support is quite high, 22, not clear. Yeah, I mean, if it's not clear, still evolving, maybe because you're new. This is where research will look into this, but obviously not today. I don't know is the other one. What's the biggest barrier to justify your PMO? So quantify value. So 40%, yeah, this is true. And this is what we're trying to track in this presentation. So you can tell me if we achieve that. I won't show you all the models, but we're building these things up. Resistance to leadership. The thing about PMOs is they create transparency. Departments don't necessarily want transparency. The more obtuse it is, or opaque, then the more likely they can play games, etc. I saw this also on the mega project, is that one of the biggest projects in the world, a part of it, they did not want a PMO, and they closed everything so they wouldn't show transparency. That's a big problem. Past PMO failures, yeah, this is a problem. Just because a PMO fails doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just wasn't set up correctly in the first place. Lack of benchmarks, yeah, I fully agree, and unclear strategic direction. Okay, very good. So thank you for that. So let me continue now. Am I still showing my screen? You can still see it, yeah? You can still see my screen?
Yes, all good.
Okay, very good. So let's have a look at the structure of formal PMOs versus informal PMOs. So important to actually have the understanding here. So this is where they have a clear mandate, a clear business case. They've got sponsorships, they've got KPIs and governance structures. There's various advantages of doing so, but there's also disadvantages as well. It takes time to go and do. We saw down here that it takes time, but also the question on the management about the value it actually creates. The risk of early or over structuring, yeah. So you can actually spend too much time structuring. If you have people that are more administration focused, they're going to add more bureaucracy into it. Others that are more project focused will probably look at efficiency. So people invariably, when they build them, and whoever they are, will build it to what they're actually comfortable with. This high expectation trust. So you actually trust it to perform. If you overpromise, that is an issue. And also you could be viewed as control focus and not client focus. This is an absolute fundamental point. By the way, just for information, that only 1 in 10 project managers are suitable for a PMO. And the reason being is because of their emotional intelligence. PMOs have very low, project managers have very low emotional intelligence, where PMO managers like functional managers have very high. So that's extremely important to actually network, to get on with people, to have more like a fatherly and experienced figure. So you actually want more experienced people in PMOs, not junior people. So informal PMOs. So these are ones that they emerge. And we saw here that it was what percentages? Well, not 20% were emerging. So PMO emerges without a formal mandate. So it really is done by somebody that sees the need for it. They don't have a defined scope or governance. So what's great is that they come in, they initiate it, they adapt it, etc. So they can prove value before formalization. But the disadvantage is that it's really reliant on 1 or 2 people. It's hard to get budgets. It's hard to scale. If somebody in leadership changes, you don't necessarily show impact because you haven't got KPIs associated with it. In fact, in the maturity and impact model we built, PMOMI, we actually have that additional scale, which is impact. And it's actually quite legitimate to actually have low maturity, high impact. So this is actually a crisis-driven PMO or something set up to solve a particular problem. Without that impact scale, you'd always think that low maturity is bad. It isn't necessarily bad, but you only find that out once you've got that additional scale, and we'll come on to that. So what triggers the formal, informal PMOs? Well, formal PMOs are typically top-down, they're demand-led. So part of a business case, or could be part of an audit, or maybe some assessment's been in the organization, they see they actually need it, or maybe that when you're looking at from a PMO director, you see there's a service gap in your service topology, that's a new word for you, or also the PMO topology where the PMO is located. So you actually may reorder or change the positioning and also what the PMOs are actually doing. So it's just like a team, different teams, and you're optimizing the teams. So in this case, you would actually have structured demand, you form it, you've got visibility, accountable, and you've got a long-term role. Informal PMOs, these are often come from need, chaos, a bottleneck. Sometimes these things come from informal networks versus formal networks. So somebody's overcoming a roadblock in the organization. So these are more from pain of urgency, informal, reactive, fast, often under-resourced. So there is both of a purpose, but you have to be very careful in staying too long, for example, being an informal PMO, because you have people working in extra time to try to get things done. Now, trust is an important thing. So you trust me to come and present to you. Then I present to you a view of the world that is empirically proven, it has experience, but it always can be backed up. We call it like a golden thread in research. So here we have trust and we have a mandate. So if you just got a mandate without trust, this is often formal PMOs when they actually start. They don't have buy-in. They've got the right to lead, the right to actually do this. And this is the same thing as Maxwell's leadership scales. Giving the right to lead doesn't mean you're actually any good at it. Yeah. So and that's the problem with PMOs in a position. They're formalized, but they need to actually build trust. They need to get buy-in. You can also have trust and no mandate. So this is typically informal. They have no sort of staying power. So if the guy leaves, the whole thing just falls apart, doesn't have KPIs. This is where you want to be, trust and mandate. This is the ideal one. But there's also PMOs that don't have trust and have no mandate. So they're doing something, and they're unrecognized. We also saw this when I was at this management consulting company. We assessed all the KPIs, we built KPI trees, and we found that middle management, 1/3 were absolutely doing nothing at all. They were just taking reports or building reports and then just not necessarily being used. So this were like not creating value, in fact, destroying value. There may be PMOs like this that do the similar sort of thing as well. So mapping types. So informal is looking at building trust but don't have power, so they're fragile. Formal is with a mandate, so it's more brittle. And what you really want to do is have one that has mandate and trust, so it's sustainable. So it's a dimension that's important. The point is that both of these need business cases. So informal needs one to survive, and the formal one needs a business case to deliver. So we come now converging both informal and formal into the business case. But if you don't build a business case, these are the risks you actually have. So I won't actually read them all out. The last one is a really important one: audit and compliance. You're doing something, you've got no formal mandate. If you're actually audited or a project fails and you're supporting it, that is a non-compliance issue. So you really want to make sure you have a business case, especially if PMOs moving towards a profession. This is the last thing you want to do. You also need to make sure that you follow things properly, but without the bureaucracy going with it. So let's have a look at a business case. I thought it might be interesting to just quickly mention about the term business case. So it originally came in the origins of Roman times, where the term came from casus, which means like an occurrence or a situation. So the Roman courts developed this. They actually then looked at building on laws based on precedent and facts. Then it moved into the 19th century into sort of newer traditions where they used it to actually demand justifications for investments. Then they looked at it from scientific rigor. So this is actually Taylorism, the time of Henry Ford. So Frederick Taylor in the US, he built, I think it was management principles. And then it moved into business cases being formalized within project management associations. So a bit of background about the case. So whether it's a legal case or a business case, there's a medical case, different types of cases, we're actually using this as a business case. So what goes into a business case? If you look at a PMO, project program portfolio, it's all very similar, but the unit of justification, whether a project is about the deliverable itself, or PMI would talk about benefits or value, that may vary, but the actual content is the same. So it has these items down in here. And there may be some local things you have as well. So we're really going to sort of focus on actually this part, the benefits. How do we actually sort of actually look at the quantification of the benefits? Cost is easy. Creating up the solutions, well, it's actually quite complex to develop PMOs that have a good future, but this is the focus of today. Okay, so these are all the points you would consider. So this is the curious cat. I won't actually go into the details. If you want to look at the differences between the PMO project program portfolio, you can go and do so in here. So looking at a structured approach for a business case, we actually written a course a few years ago. It's a 5-day course on how you look at case opportunities. So there's an opportunity, you create the trigger. It could be for the PMO project or program. You look at the definition of the case, the blueprint, case development, the case decision, you implement it. So that's when the project started. Then you realize the benefits out of it, and then you actually close the case. So we actually call this the business case AIPMO certification. So we have all the materials, but we don't actually formally, it's not one of the main ones we actually go and do. So this is just, there's approach behind it, and it's probably pretty similar for any business case approach in building. So what are the types of business cases you would consider in the PMO field? Well, the easiest one to do is just the service itself. So a PMO with no services is just a shell, there's nothing in it. So you have mandated services, which are always compliance and assurance, plus whatever else has been mandated. And it could be on the reporting side, it could be simulation models, it could be scheduling, for example. So this is the easiest thing to actually define it. The next one up is then the PMO itself. Of course, it's got services built within it. So you actually justify the PMO and the services. You look at a service across multiple PMOs. So, for example, you want to standardize your reporting service. It may be the Center of Excellence writes it, but it's used by many other PMOs. And then the top one is actually the target operating model. So this is actually building PMOs or designing the operating model, the target, the PMOs, where they're located, and also which services, which are service owners, which are service users. That's the most complex one. So going from simple to complex. So how do you go about building a business case for your PMO? So this is where I hand over to Yoxi. If you could do the poll on this one. So don't take more than like 30 seconds or so, if that's okay. So so you can select multiple choices, I think, Yoxi, yeah. So up to 3 options you can select. So how would you go about building a business case for your PMO? So 1 up to 3 options, multiple choice. So we have 10. 41, 50. So we should have 113. I think there's 113 responses out of 148 attending. So 81. So we just have 5 seconds and then we'll close out. 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 2, 1. Okay, let's close it out. Okay, so share results. So PMO activities, show times and cost and savings. So that's second most, or services to strategy and qualify enabling. Use project failure as well. In fact, we recently gave you multiple options. There's multiple ways of doing it, of creating it, and that's why it's taken us some time to actually work it out as one way of doing this, which I'll actually go and show you. So thank you for that. So let's just close that one. So you've gone through, you know what your problem is, and you see the opportunity, you've done your strategic alignment, as some of you explained, explore the options, you've got the preferred solution. So the challenge is the financial aspects, i.e. the purpose of this presentation. Really, when you want to do that is that you want to use some sort of structured framework to design, build, and operate your PMO, and then actually look at each component and actually how do you measure success, and then you can actually quantify what that actually means. So this is actually a strategic life cycle framework that we built. In fact, this is what was built over the last 10 years. The top one, this is the PMO lifecycle framework. This is a strategy piece. This is the PMO services lifecycle framework. It actually took us 18 months to work out how to go and do this one down here. In fact, we read over 1,500 pages of ITIL plus other service management, and then we built this. I won't explain how this thing actually works, but the point is you need to have a reference point. When we were giving courses before we wrote this Service and Capabilities book, people struggled to say what they actually did. And when we had it, it was between night and day because we listed all the services, we put it into the template, and they can pick what they did. And in fact, we were surprised how much people say they actually do. In fact, what we found is that when we would do maturity assessments, what they said they actually did, they don't actually do. But I think it was probably more that they were wishing or hoping to go and do it or something. But you need to actually have something to reference against it. Otherwise, you will struggle. If you can't say what you're doing, how can you say what value you're creating? So we actually use this strategic lifecycle framework, and then you can actually look at different points where you can measure whether you're successful, and you can also quantify that. So what are the service targets? In looking at sort of management, okay, so various measures, organizational targets, looking at continuous improvement. There's many aspects, so literally hundreds of these things. So this is also an information slide as well. The thing is, if you're looking at something for your organization, it's very scenario-based, which means it's within the context of what you're trying to do within either a delivery-focused PMO, so like a project PMO, or non-delivery is more like a strategy management office or a center of excellence. They don't actually deliver projects. So that's the differentiation. So here's some scenarios down here. And then with the description and what's it best for, and then the basis of the qualification. So you can see that yourself. So service domains, I mentioned this, where there's actually 24 service domains in the book here. The 700 pages, we describe 22. We have 2 new ones. One is asset management for construction, one is demand management. We actually do have portfolio management down here, but not every organization has got portfolios, and therefore we have to include the demand management as a separate domain. So PMI don't use this. We use the term service domain. PMI use the term performance domain. Axelis use the term themes. So as I say, we have 24 now. They have something like 8. So how do you actually find a way to categorize these benefits? You have all of these in the standard. We've got 100 descriptions down here of benefits. So you can actually categorize them by various different ways. However, the easiest way is to look at it by service domain itself. And so what you have is linking these benefits directly to the service domain. So we describe the benefit to the actual domain itself, or you can link it directly services to the service domains. In this case, the stakeholder management domain. So this is actually referencing the book, and then you can actually see where the service benefits are if you're actually going to offer this yourself or considering offering it. The problem is this is very complicated. And so we need to sort of find a way to make it universally applicable. So even when we have the book, and you can actually work out the service benefits for each. In fact, we do show it in the book itself. What we would suggest is categorize them into the service domains and then determine the influence on each service domain on project success. The problem is it requires research, and this is actually what we've done, and then apply it to any given program or portfolio. So this is where we've actually built a model that allows, if you're saying, okay, what services do you want to deliver, and in total in service, in say, stakeholder management, we've actually worked out the contribution to project success and actually work out the financials on that. So here's an example of the model itself. So here's the input fields. You have the service domain or service. We have this thing called enablement factor. This is the maturity level. So we use it for a certain purpose. And there's some other factors that go into it. We look at the weighting tables, and then we actually create the results down here. And we can cover 1 service domain, 2 service domain, etc. So we try to make it much simpler for you to justify it. I don't have the time now to explain it, but this is actually what we've built. This is the icon for that. So one is on a service perspective, but also the other one is on the actual PMO itself. This is far more complex. And in fact, I've introduced now these new scales here. These are brand new scales, new as in last year. It took us 6 months to actually develop them. This one actually is a brand new impact scale. You've never seen this before. It's a 7-point scale. PMOs actually do destroy value or create zero impact. Sorry, yeah, they destroy value or zero impact, or they do create a synergized impact. So we need to have these to actually use them to determine this is the financial contribution, and this is actually called the enablement factor. So a PMO that's at level 2 is not going to be as efficient in creating value as a level 5. And so we've actually got these particular scales and models and how this actually works. So this is all part of the maturity model. Here's the example. So you have a delivery PMO that's got a project portfolio of $1 million. It's a low impact level of 1. It's got a 50% failure rate. And then we actually look at using different curves. So in certain PMOs like transformation, you use an extended S curve, which means that the benefits come near the end or the higher maturities. With, for example, compliance and assurance PMOs, it's a much flatter curve. So the types of PMOs, we know the types of curves, and we actually automatically can work out what's the investment for the assessment or the improvements. And it goes up to a maximum point of 5, and that's where you see 40 to 50% improvement than if you were actually over level 1. And what this means is that reducing the projects at risk in your portfolio. So we've actually calculated it, and we use this actually on proposals. And there's some assumptions down here as well. So it's taken us time to develop it, but we can actually look in the business case for you, whether you want to look from a service perspective or whether you want to look from a PMO perspective in the models we've created. Time is moving on. So cost and funding, this is actually a view in the Service and Capabilities book, how you view services from an asset perspective and the pieces. Everything's like a Lego puzzle, how it all fits together. And this is how you actually create your models. If you look at the cost associated with delivery of PMO services, these are the typical cost categories. I won't actually describe them. You can actually read those. If you look at the funding models, so to your organization, how you actually fund it, whether it's central or charged or project-based. So this is pretty typical for a business case. You would just pick out the one that's actually relevant for you. So if you put all of these things together that I actually described in the business case, every PMO needs to justify what it's doing, whether it's formal or informal, if it's surviving or it's going to go on scale. It all needs a clear business case. Structure is important, and I mentioned that, and there's a lot more structure than I actually put together. So the way that projects, programs, and PMOs are actually structured, how you actually view them, we actually reference against the models that used to build the PMOs, 1, 2, 3, etc., to improve the PMOs, but they're also used for other purposes, such as looking at success criteria, how you actually looked at where the value is actually being created. Business cases must evolve. Yeah, they're living documents. You need to refresh them because you're always looking at new things, changing services. You should always justify them, at least in your mind, know how to justify these things. The funding models should be clear and transparent. And then we've actually helped you in the standardization of these business case models. And if you can do this, then you should be able to move beyond this sort of believing we're creating value, which is actually quite difficult, especially with the savvy CEO and CFO, to like an evidence-based approach of turning justification to impact. That's my presentation. Over to you, Yoxi. I'll stop sharing.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. An hour is quite a short time, as we can see. So let's check the chat questions and comments. There's a couple of questions. What are the top 3 most important concrete steps in starting a PMO, in your opinion?
Yeah, so the first one is to set up a PMO, design it properly. You need to have somebody that understands the best way to get things up, get it right first time. So it's really looking at having the design approach, the method, the building blocks. That's one. The second one is that you need to understand the latest concepts. What is out there invariably is a rehash of what's been done before. So, go on a training course, read the books. Understanding the latest approach is really important. Don't design. So, for example, if you look at P3O, it was written in 2008. The concepts are 2004, and people certify on that. So it's like certifying on an iPhone 4, whereas if you have a leading or research-driven, it's always being updated with the latest research. It's like an iPhone 16 or iPhone 17. So always take the latest knowledge for this, and then work out for yourself what makes sense for your organization. So you're understanding what makes sense for you, and then the third one is making sure you actually have people and the methodology and approach to look at actually building it properly. There's other things as well, but those are 3 important things to get started.
Okay. So, and then how will the role and responsibilities of PMO change as the number of transformative development projects increase? And there's continuing, what specific skills are expected from the PMO in the implementation, planning, or particularly demanding development projects?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a complex question. So there's a lot in there. Evolving, some organizations like in Germany, they just have more assurance. So just the compliance and reporting aspects of it. Other organizations use under the PMO entity a lot more. And I think it really depends on what is needed and who's got the experience. And I remember somebody sort of said to me, in fact, it's Professor Reinhard Wagner, in Germany, we don't do that. And, or PMOs don't do that. I had a guy on a course from Saudi Arabia that he was looking after air conditioning systems because the CEO said, look, we've got nobody else to give it to. You're a good guy on your team, look after them, and then they would transfer it. So really it's what in transformative projects, it's important that you enable the organization. There should be PMOs across the organization. They're all working together as a team in an operating model. And therefore, depending on what is needed and when it's needed and where it's needed, what they do, the services they offer will actually be coordinated to create that objective or to achieve the goals that are set in the transformation. The specifics you would have to talk one-on-one about, but that's the approach I would take.
Mm-hmm. And then how to carry out change management if you become part of a formal PMO without a business case and documented KPIs.
How to carry out change management? Did you say change management?
Yes, how to carry out change management if you become part of a formal PMO without a business
But
case.
is that change management in the sense of changing what you're doing, or is it actually change management as a service onto your project teams, for example? So you're managing the change management processes that a project does. Depends on what they actually mean. I think it means about changing the formal one, sort of how you change from an informal to a formal PMO.
Change management in the sense of the PMO's business case.
Okay. So in other words, putting a business case together to become more of a formalized PMO and then with a service catalog, for example. I mean, what you want to do is you follow the methodology. We have a lot of PMOs. It's a whole number of things that you need to go through as you do it. We actually do that as part of the course, and I don't want to sell it. It's not selling courses, but it's part of this where you actually look at setting your PMO vision, mission, looking at your principles, you're defining what services you're actually doing, and then what you're doing is what are planned or what we need to change to. And then that's that point you actually want to create the business case, the justification. It's not only just offering it, have you got the capacity and capability? That's where the cost actually comes to it. Then there's the whole transformation actually. So if you're actually taking more of a role in the organization, you need also to change the organization. In other words, reduce the resistance you're probably going to get from project managers because they may see your increased role or your increased impact as maybe in things that they're actually doing. And we have a whole section on this of whether this should be within the PMO, with the project team, is it across PMOs, etc. There's a whole method behind it. It's not easy to answer in a 30-second or 1-minute question.
And there's a really good one to end this session. If one wants to dig deeper into the PMO business case domain, what would you recommend as a starting point, as a first starting point?
In the business case domain, you need to get the information at hand. So you need to do your current state assessment. So this is actually the maturity and impact model. You need to know where you are today. So if you're going to put a business case together, let's have a look at what your mandate is if you've actually got one, or what are you actually doing if you're doing it informally. What are the challenges that you're actually having? What is the value of what you're actually doing? What is actually being requested of your PMO? What do you see as important, but the business doesn't actually realize all the areas in the business that this is something that needs to be addressed. So you actually want to understand more about your PMO before you start to attempt to put the business case together. Because you need to understand all those points in that list. There's an ordered sequence that you're going to go through. What are the options? Alternative analysis. Do I offer these services? Have they got success factors in place to make sure they're actually successful, or do I actually have other services I actually start from? And so it's a detailed process. And I don't know whether you've got one PMO or you've got several PMOs. We have people coming on courses that want to reduce 2 to 1 PMO. They go to 3 PMOs. There's certain rules on how you design operating models in organizations for PMOs. So I would need to know more details before I would do what I describe, and you can see this. But once you have that information, then you can determine then how best to go to get more resources. I assume because a business case suggests you're going to do something, and in return, the company gets this and this benefit. So cost and benefit.
I also have good answer for this. Please join us in Kakola in November, and then you can have a real good place to get more answers from Robert. Also, there's a LinkedIn link in the beginning of the chat, so you can link with Robert and continue discussions and ask questions and see his postings. But we are close to 10 o'clock, so I'll end the recording first. Thank you, everyone.